I've got to say thank you as well. I mean, this is amazing for me as a lowly pilot to come here and mix with all you guys, life-saving people every day. It's an awesome to be here, so thanks very much indeed. I do kind of feel like being thrown to the wolves, mind you, but we'll see how we go. Hey, so listen, I've got 7 minutes and 49 seconds to give you a quick insight into command gradient error in pre-hospital care. So you've probably heard, maybe, about power gradient, trans-cockpit gradient, authority gradient, etc. And they're kind of all the same thing. And I'm not going to bore you with the definition, but I will give you my attempt at a description of what this is. And here it is. So it's the actual or perceived difference in rank that inhibits communication, leads to a loss in the joint mental model or shared mental model, and which could lead to an undesirable event, which in healthcare is clearly not a great thing. Now, I'm going to start with a quick story. And this is a story about a plane that took off from JFK and flew to Portland, Oregon. The weather was great. The crew on board was a captain, as you can see, a co-pilot and a flight engineer. As they approached to land in Portland, they came across a problem with the undercarriage. But hey, there's enough people with enough talent, with enough time, and enough fuel to solve this problem. And you might have even heard about this story, because in aviation, I know that if an accident happens, I'm going to hear about it informally within about 2 days, anywhere nearly in the world. And maybe within 2 weeks, we'll hear a formal report of what happened. And I'm not sure how well that happens in medicine at the moment. We've got a lot of corporate learning from everybody else's mistakes. So we're going to come to this. We're going to focus on the medicine first of all. Now, that's a bit presumptuous of me, probably you are doing much more to patients than you ever have done before. I have the privilege of spending time with medics, HEMS teams, surgical teams, observing, and you do a whole lot of stuff from reversing warfarin, cyanide, blood transfusions, thoracotomy, Reboa. I think Atul Gawande could say it better than I could in his book, Checklist Manifesto. He said that the volume and complexity of what we now know exceeds our ability to deliver its benefits safely. That's a really interesting place to be. So we need to generate teams that are functional, work well, and generated from people we've never met before. So I joined HEMS 10 years ago, and I thought this was going to be a classic case of command gradient error. For me, this was the perfect analog. Captain, co-pilot, doctor, paramedic, complex environments, dynamic decisions, this is going to be a classic. But it wasn't, because they had selected and trained it out. Quick example, paramedic selection. On the day, we'll send a paramedic into a room to go what they think is to go and test their technical skills. They will walk into a room and see a HEMS team already working on a patient with a doc doing something wrong. The task, of course, is to not just see if, but how they can change the course of action. That's interesting. The next thing is you focus on the doctor, slightly different perspective. And I'm going to use a slightly extreme example here. We have a doctor who works for us who used to be the lead of the whole London ambulance service. Okay? So when she turned up on scene, the whole job went flat as the command gradient went through the roof as everybody recognized her. So she had to develop a pretty impressive strategy to overcome this problem. So she would say things like, hey guys, I've just turned up, you're doing a great job. Can I get some oxygen for you? Hey, I'm not here to run the show. I'm just here to bring doctor stuff if you need it. And then she would lull him into a false sense of security and guide as she would. And that might be a lesson for us. So I think we've kind of got the teams sorted. So the internal teams, we can work pretty close. We all understand a little bit of CRM. We can get that sorted. But maybe that's not your problem in pre-hospital care. Because if you're a doctor, a paramedic, a nurse, EMT, whatever, walking out there in uniform, you carry with you a command gradient already. Okay, and that's a bit of a challenge. Just imagine, extreme example. Let's take a HEMS team who's just jumped out of a helicopter, run down the street like the heroes they are with the bags on. They can pretty much do what they want to that patient without being challenged. And this may not be a very good example, but if you cannulated an artery by mistake because your bandwidth is smashed, everybody sees it, Are they going to think, oh, this is some new super cool HEMS way of putting drugs straight in the artery? It's possible. So we need to be wary of that. And there's maybe a few tips as we move along. As we go through any single job, you might move from leading to following and alternate. For example, if you're the doctor, you might do the technical skill. As it comes to the packaging, the paramedic might take over. You might be following up from after that. So we need to alternate. We need to see which mode we're in and then pick up some strategies to make sure this works. So if we take leading, for example, if you are leading, find yourself leading, you need to develop an environment that allows people to question you. It allows people to speak up and to spot the problems. Overall, let's keep it simple, you need to be receptive. When following, if you find yourself in that position, you need to be assertive. Is the key to it. You probably got that, if you're following, you've probably got the bandwidth to spot the problem in the first place. So make sure that gets escalated. Hey, listen, I really appreciate there is a problem with this. There are senior people around that makes it difficult. I mean, I'm going to be the last person who want to tell this guy not to lean against the wall, for example. So you might need a strategy to overcome these things. And I guess you've probably heard about this stuff. Graded assertiveness. We use PACE. And it kind of goes like this. First of all, you probe. You say, hey, is this right? Could we be doing better at this? And that kind of gives you a bit of a get-out clause. If you've got it wrong, then you kind of get out at this stage. If you need to escalate it, if this isn't going the right way, then you can move it up to the next stage. And you can just alert and just say, hey, listen, I'm not sure this is right. I'm not sure this is going the right way. Is this what we should be doing? And eventually it goes a little bit further. And eventually you've got to challenge them and say, guys, this is not right. This is wrong. We need to reassess. Now, very rarely do you get to this point, but eventually you might get to the point where you just say stop. Now, in aviation, we have quite a good strategy. We use this phrase, I have control. And if anybody in the cockpit says, I have control, it's assumed you don't have the time to question that. You just relinquish control to the guy next to you. And that's maybe an interesting thing, food for thought maybe. So, I went back to this, I nearly forgot this. Back to this flight here, flight 173. So these guys got overhead, found a problem with the gear, one of the wheels just wouldn't go down. Okay, and there are many solutions to this. But they flew around for an hour. And remember this guy, because the flight engineer spotted the problem. The co-pilot spotted the problem and told the captain. And when the first engine failed, because they ran out of fuel, the captain was surprised. Not as surprised as when the other engines failed and turned into a glider. Because what had happened is the fuel had run out and the plane crashed, killing 10 people, including the flight engineer who spotted the problem in the first place, and injured 74 people. In summary, don't be the guy, don't be the captain that doesn't listen, and don't be the flight engineer that didn't speak up. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That was amazing. We've been talking about this past week and in the aviation industry and how, particularly with regard to the culture of sharing errors and mistakes. And I think that they do the very best in the world at that. So this is you shed a different light on that. So it's fantastic. What's Twitter have?
So we look at this, you've talked about aviation, we've talked about medicine, this gradient, even in parenting. So, can a situation, the grandkids are over, they behave perfectly for me.
This might not be from Twitter.
My daughter looks at it and says, why do they always behave for you? You know, what's different? You know, is her command gradient too flat? You know, with the kids. You know, should there always be a hierarchy, or is there a sort of a sweet spot in the middle?
Yeah, hey, this is a really important point, actually, because it's not as simple as I've just made it out to be. There is a dynamic in this. And I think one of the, I'm not sure he's here at the moment, but one doctor came to me and said, hey, listen, I've been trying that stuff, and this is not working for me. I go, hey, well, what's the problem? He said, I'm a consultant, doctor, and I've got the command gradient so flat that all my registrars are calling me mate and do nothing I ask them to do now.
Yep.
Okay, now, clearly that's just way too wrong on the wrong side. And there is a dynamic. And I think we need people who have more EQ than IQ, more emotional quotient. The people who relate, people who understand, and the people who can know when they need to be leading, when they need to be following, and where that command gradient needs to be. One further example, if I may. There was one doctor with us a while ago now who was bullish. He was on the extrovert side of stuff. He was really bullish and quite gung-ho. And we actually spent quite a lot of work with him trying to just feed in, just talk to the guys, try and just work a bit better. And there was one particular job where a little mini car with 5 youngsters crashed into a tree. 3 were in cardiac arrest, the other 2 were very unwell. And this was the time where we needed that guy. Because he just said, right, you do that. Everybody was startled, bunny in the headlights. You do that, you do that, you do that. And that's when you need to change. So if we have that ability to change when we need to, that's the ultimate answer. It's not easy.